Good evening, Eugene. How are you?
I'm great, Jana. Thanks. How are you today?
I'm great. Wow, what a week. So, for those who
Yeah.
haven't tuned
Well,
in before to our podcast, I'm Jana London, founder of the Natural Women's Council, and Eugene is a retired director of an engineering firm and does much of the research, hours and hours of research and reading to help us make sense of where everything is coming from. And it's been a week. I have to say, it's been a blur looking back on the last week. We interviewed Mary, the whistleblower teacher. We said, how are we going to get a whole year worth of a DCU course into less than 30 minutes, which we did. We released it and we thought, we've really got to get it out. And now we are on our own channels, which is our own small Twitter account and our own small YouTube. We're alone at nearly 600,000 views, and we've seen the video be downloaded the full 28 minutes to play as a standalone on lots of social media platforms. And it's in all the parent groups. So it's probably at nearly well over 1 million views, I would say, if we're 600,000 just on our own two channels. So it's been an absolute mind blowing. We're just so blown away by the people that have come up to support Mary and stand with Mary and say we don't agree with this content. But there's been a real mixed response, and I've looked through most of the couple thousand YouTube comments, and I get lots of emails on it. And the overall response is people are horrified, as we were when Mary came to us to share it. They're absolutely horrified. Parents are now looking closely into their children's school books, which is great. That's what we should all be doing. And even though the material hasn't been pushed out, the new material that Mary learned hasn't been pushed out to all teachers across the country, we're getting feedback from a lot of parents that even the books that are in existence now, they're really shocked with. And, we had one on Twitter that shared an English book even that was promoting this ideology in the English book for the child. So people are angry. They're looking at the school books, but there's also been a few people who have come out and said that it's misinformation or it's a hoax or my classroom, I'm a teacher, my classroom doesn't have this. So we're going to talk tonight about exactly, what's in the classroom now. And it is true for the teachers watching this and the parents watching this. This may not yet, some of the information Mary shared, some of it may not be in the classroom yet because only 34 teachers were selected for this first DCU program, the year-long program. But we stand behind everything that Mary said. We have all of the evidence. We didn't just do a random interview without preparation. There were loads and loads of hours reviewing hundreds of different pages of paperwork and looking at screen grabs and documents. And we have the evidence and we stand with what Mary said, and it is horrific. And if anybody wants to doubt it, we will continue to share more and more evidence as we go. And it's also made its way into the Dáil. We saw Senator Keoghan spoke up about it. Senator McDowell wrote an article today. Independent Ireland, a party, is going to be raising it in the Dáil. So it's gotten the attention of the parents, the media, the teachers, and the public reps. So it's done what we needed it to do from that awareness perspective. But what we need now to do is to stop it. So I'll turn it over to you, Eugene, to start.
okay. Thanks, Jana. So we'll get into it now, into the material. I think the first thing we want to talk about first, I guess, um, is just what's in the classrooms today, because we need to clear this up, because some people could be in panic. My God, is this happening in my classroom today? And other people are saying, well, this isn't happening at all, this is not real, etc. So the truth is usually somewhere in between, and that's basically the classroom experience. Even without what was covered in that video and the DCU course, the classroom experience today for any of the new curriculum can vary significantly. And it does depend on a lot of things. It depends on the individual school, which books were selected, if they actually selected any books at all, or if they're using the Living Love material, for example, or the material that's available in curriculum online, which is what the recommendation is. Right now, people should be aware that the books were published and printed before the curriculum was finalized. So they do not represent the curriculum for SPHE, and they should not be used. And that's the guidance that the ASTI gave, and we covered that in a previous video. So people should be using curriculum online, or they should be using the Living Love. They should not be using the books. So that's the first point. So the experience will be very different, and different teachers will take different approaches in the school, depending on their own political disposition, depending on the parental influence. If they have a very close engagement with parents, some parents may want it to be one way, some parents maybe want it to be a different way, and that's the prerogative of each individual school. So that's the first thing. Only 34 teachers were trained on this thing. So that's the other thing. So that's only a minuscule number of teachers who are going out there who attended this, got the same experience that Mary got per the video. So again, very limited in terms of what you're going to see. I guess the concerns we have are not just what Mary outlined on that video. We're going to cover some of the broader concerns associated with the backdrop to what was covered in that course, because that's actually potentially more concerning, because that could have inputs or impact on things like the primary curriculum, SPHE, for example. So we're going to give you a bigger picture today, which isn't restricted to just the context of the DCU course, because when you look at the backdrop, there are some troubling things in there. We'll get to them. So right now, very few schools or no schools should be seeing this. Not to the full extent, certainly, that was outlined in the video. So that's a good news. This is an early warning bell. I call it like a canary in the coal mine. It's an indicator there's a problem. And thankfully, we've got it very early. This stuff has happened in other countries, like in Wales, like in England, in the UK, or in the US and Canada. And they did not get an early warning. And it's been going on for years before parents got an awareness of what was going on. So this is good. It's good news. We have this. And again, thank you to Mary for coming forward, because she was very brave to do what she did. And I think a lot of people in Ireland would be thanking her down the line, if not today. So the other thing,
and just to comment, Eugene, since Mary spoke up, another teacher who was on the DCU course with Mary got in touch with Gript Media. They announced today that will be published. So it'll be interesting to see the comments from that other teacher coming out as well.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, again, just to confirm. So the people who are kind of saying this didn't happen, it's misinformation, etc. I'm sorry, guys, you are not correct. And, and we have the supporting, and you'll see by the end when we go through by the time we get to the end of this video, you'll understand where it came from, and you will not be surprised at what Mary went through on the video, because you'll see where it came from. It won't be surprising to you at all. So even if you do have one of the DCU SPHE graduates in your school, again, it's no guarantee that you're going to see all the stuff that was covered in the video. Again, it will depend on the ethos of the school and some of the same things we talked about earlier, because different schools manage this in different ways. So it will vary. And then the combination, however, and this is the concern, this is the point of what we saw in that course and the underpinnings of the course. In particular, the World Health Organization's view of holistic sexuality education are hugely concerning. And they open the door for a course that has the type of material that you saw. That's the problem. So right now, we're actually basing our curriculum and using the World Health Organization guidelines and the equivalent guidelines from UNESCO as standards. And when any time a parent complains about aspects of these things, we get responses from people like the HSE basically pointing us to these guidelines and basically saying we're just following them. This is the UNESCO guidelines. This is the WHO standards, and basically put up with it. And what we want to call out today in this video is that there's problems with those. Now, we've done them in detail and we'll have links in the description. So we've gone into those in detail, and we'll give you some pointers today, and we'll give you some at least high-level outlines of how concerning those guidelines are and how inappropriate they are. And right now, they do underpin the potential experience, not just in junior cycle, but senior cycle and primary school. And I think that's where people should be really concerned. Now, the other thing I think that's really important, and there should be no negativity towards teachers, because this is not the teachers that are driving this. Let's be absolutely clear. This is coming through the NCCA, first and foremost, pushed through as a curriculum, as a new curriculum, and pushed through groups like EJA, who do the in-service training, and people like DCU, who created the SPHE course. This is not teachers. So we have loads of teachers in our group, and the teachers in Ireland, in the main, like 99% of the teachers in this country, are not politically driven. They want to do the best thing for the children in their classroom. And, you know, I know that they're very uncomfortable with some of the material they've been asked to deal with. And some of them are probably very reluctant to say anything because, you know, they know the sort of reaction that you can get in our current climate in this country, unfortunately, where you tend to get shut down and call names. So I have 100% sympathy for teachers on this. And the notion that any teacher would have to go through and go through some of the material that Mary went through is just horrific. And I think lots of teachers would live in dread of having to do that. So let's not blame this on the teachers, please. This is coming from the top down, basically. So just to make that point.
And I posted up on social media, and I can post it again, is the Irish Education Alliance reached out to us and said that, you know, they've had a lot of teachers reaching out to them. And if people want to join the force of teachers, and it's a very large group, a few hundred in there, to absolutely email the Irish Education Alliance. And you're not alone if you don't want to teach this. You won't be othered. There's quite a silent majority. We've had an awful lot reach out to us the last week. So we do ask teachers to stand up, speak up, protect children, stand with Mary, and put pressure on your unions and your headmasters, your principals to not let this into schools.
Yeah, 100%. No, so it's important to make that point. We're with you. Don't blame the teachers. A quick run through here. I'm not going to spend any time talking about it. We'll have links in the description. Just important to understand what the applicable Irish legislation are. The Irish Education Act 1998, Department of Education referenced that. The Constitution, Article 42.1, and the Children's First Act, which we've talked about before in terms of exposing children to inappropriate material. So just a reference point. So the question is, how do we get here? So let's get into the story. So there's 4 or 6 points I want to talk about. The curriculum development that actually created the 2023 Junior Cycle SPHE Curriculum. So I want to talk about that for a few minutes. The experience of the Welsh RSE program. Now, you might be scratching your head saying, why are we talking about the Welsh RSE program? Well, bear with me because you'll find out about that in a minute as to why we have to look at that. I've already mentioned the international sexuality education standards from the WHO and UNESCO, and we'll talk a little bit more about those. The pedagogical approach, and now people are probably scratching their head as to what does this mean? It's basically the way you teach something in the classroom. It's the approach you take. You know, you have your curriculum, and you can choose to teach it in very different ways and take very different approaches. And some of those approaches can be very good, very inspiring. Some of them may be very political, for example, which we'll touch on, etc. So pedagogical approach is very important. The related academic literature, and this is the literature that would have been referenced as part of the DCU course, you know, that Mary would have been asked to read, and, you know, as part of, you know, outside of class hours, to, you know, various papers would have been recommended, and they would have been used to guide the development of the course. So we'll refer to a few of those, and they are important because they do influence. You can see elements from some of those papers appearing in some of the things that Mary talked about. And then the last thing is ultimately the academic team in DCU, or the people obviously who put together the course, as they would do any course. People like Kate Monsell and Dr. Leanne Call are probably the 2 main people who were involved in that. So these are the 6 elements that made up the course that Mary talked about on her video. So we'll start getting into it. So a prelude before we get to the actual curriculum development. This was there was a Dail committee on education set up. It was running for a number of years, which was basically discussing the strategy and approach that they would take. Obviously, they would engage with academia. They'd get academic experts in to talk about, what the new curriculum should do and the sort of changes that we should do. And so this is an opening statement made by a Dr. Aoife Neary from University of Limerick, a sociologist, and we'll show her profile later on. So she was engaged with them. She made this opening statement, I guess, and this does kind of set the scene for what followed. And you'll kind of see that when you read through it. Now, we have a link to this in the description, so you can download it. It's on the government.e website. So you can download this and read it for yourself. The text that we have here is the exact text as written and as spoken by Dr. Neary on the day. So you can see some of the things she's talking about there, taking into account around fears around childhood innocence acting as a barrier, for example. So I guess that's something that might raise alarm bells with some parents. So, and then talking about, beginning this in the early years, and this will be a theme that we'll come back to later on, as low as young as 3 years of age. And you'll see again where some of this comes from. So she talks about the need for specialist pathways so that you would have specialist skills to teach RSE and SPHE. And that's exactly what the DCU course was. So, and I think she's rightfully saying that. I mean, most teachers would say that they don't feel equipped to deal with some of this very sensitive subject matter without getting the proper training. And so there's a validity in having that course, so that we're not arguing about that. So that's the reason. She's basically alluding to that point here and saying we need teacher training basically for this that's dedicated to RSE and SPHE. She talks about the ethos as being a restraint, and it will be. And that will continue, whether it's Catholic ethos or Muslim ethos or whatever. It will come to bear. So I think we're just going to have to live with that. And then she talks about the whole school approach, the spiral, sustained, meaningful approach to RSE. Now, the whole school approach is problematic, and we'll come back to that again, because it has consequences, and it's one of the particular issues that we have with SPHE and some of the other stuff that's going on in the curriculum.
And Eugene, I'll just touch on the teaching methods changes there. The first bullet, a move from the overemphasis on risk to creating safe and ethical teaching and learning spaces. So that's interesting, because we've asked in lots of situations with this for the risk assessments that were done, whether it be the library books that were highly sexual or what have you. And this states right here, they don't want an emphasis on the risk. So the risk assessment, how would this harm a child? How would this traumatize a child? How would this sexualize a child? They don't want to talk about the risk. They want that safe, ethical training. But really, without a risk assessment, it's not ethical at all.
Yeah, no, and again, we'll see when we start talking about the standards themselves where this where this kind of comes from, and that's kind of comes from the standards as well. As I say, you can download this. We're not going to go through it all. You can read it yourself. It's not too long. It's only a page and a half. And I guess the summary of this sheet is important, and it'll bring us into the next section. To conclude, she says she suggests that the recent developments in RSE in Wales, because they were developing a relationship and sexuality education program in Wales about this time and just after this time. And two of the people involved in that, Renold and McGeeney, Emma Renold and Esther McGeeney, they put together this paper, and it's referenced here at the very bottom. There's a link to it, so you can download it from Cardiff University. And so the recommendation here basically is to look at the approach in Wales and look at perhaps taking those on board in Ireland. And that's a really important connection. So let's kind of move on from there then. So this is the curriculum working group. You won't find this online. You have to do an FOI request to get it. These are the 13 people that are constituents of the working group on SPHE for the junior cycle. And Dr. Neary is in there as she was co-opted as an academic contributor to the committee. Now, I think we have a few issues with this. First of all, if you look at the names there, no, they don't have the pronouns. They do have the names. There's no men on here. So 13 women are on this committee. So I don't see where the diversity is here. And there's other issues with diversity as we get into it. So I have a huge problem with this. Now, I do understand that women are overrepresented in education. But when did that ever stop us looking for a level of diversity in any area? And we just don't have it here. And if you look at the student population, it's 50-50 or very close to it. So I have an issue straight out the gate with that. So there's a problem here. Now,
Ireland's big now talking about gender equality. It's everywhere. It's going into all the laws. So from a gender equality perspective, as a man, how is it equal or fair that there's only 100% of women impacting sex education for the entire country? I mean, that is not equal, diverse, inclusive at all. And I see another name on here as well. Siobhan O'Higgins is one that I believe Mary mentioned in her interview. She was one of the lecturers on the DCU course.
So a couple of other points here. So we see a group here called the National Parents Council Post-Primary Group. So people might be thinking, oh, there we go. The parents are represented. My Fanning is representing, the parents on this. Well, you'll find, as we'll cover in the subsequent slides, this group was actually disbanded. It was found to be not fit for purpose. by the Department of Education and Norma Foley, and she basically disbanded it on that basis. This was not a voice of parents at this table, by no means. The other thing that's missing from here is any representation in terms of child psychology, child protection, etc. There's nobody on here covering that. There's no clinician or nobody coming in bringing that perspective to the table. Okay, so I think we see that there's problems here. For the makeup of this working group from the get-go, there was a problem. And I think, in terms of, there's also no representation from a faith perspective. It's as if it doesn't exist.
I saw a couple of tweets, Eugene, from the Catholic Secondary School Parent Association. I believe they tried to get onto this group and they were refused a few times.
Yeah, they were. And they had a very strong candidate with a lot of experience in education who could have come on board here, but they were refused. They weren't brought on board. And there was also a male. It would have been the only man on the committee. So obviously that would have changed the gender balance a little bit. So straight away, we have a huge issue with what happened here, and it should be sending alarm bells. Now, the other thing that you could be thinking in the back of your mind is, what are the politics of the people on this committee? Now, we haven't done an investigation into everybody on this committee, so we're not going to go through that. But I think straight away you can see that there's an issue and there is not diversity here. And I think that's a problem. And I think some of the issues regarding potential safeguarding risks, etc., that we've been highlighting, you can see how they occurred because there was no voice around this table. There was nobody in that room who was going to put that voice forward from a child welfare perspective. Okay, so I think enough said. Let's move on. We have links to everything in the description. So that's something we probably forgot to say at the very start. For all our videos, and I know people look at them on phones and they look at them on different devices, and it might be hard to actually look into the description and take a stuff. But we put the links in with the backup material so that you can go and investigate the stuff yourself. You don't have to listen to me or Jana talking or believe us. You can go and investigate it yourself. So the next thing I want to go into is this report, and it's available, link in the description, which provides a report on the consultation phase that took place on the curriculum. So the normal process, if you haven't been involved in this before, is that a draft curriculum is put out there and it goes through a consultation phase. The specific workshops are done with teachers, and then there's a broad consultation for everybody. So any member of the public can submit something. They can either fill out an online questionnaire or they can send it in via an email. So this basically summarizes all of the respondents. And I think you can see pretty clearly that there's a massive amount of response from parents compared to the other groups. And you can kind of scratch your head then and say, well, then how come parents felt they weren't represented at the end of the day? We'll maybe get into that as we kind of talk about it. But
Eugene, I'll just jump in here from a parent perspective. Is I can tell you that no parent was invited to submit this consultation. We weren't advised. Parents and schools weren't advised it was happening, and we can do on another podcast, Watch This Space. Lisa from the Natural Women's Council did a Freedom of Information Act requesting the NCCA to prove that parents were involved in the consultation, that we weren't invited. We wouldn't have known about it had we not gone to their website or been made aware by groups like ours. And they refused the FOIA. They first said it took too many hours, and then they refused our appeal. So they would not and have not to date given us the information to prove parents were involved, because we were sidelined from this. They didn't want parents involved in the consultation.
Yep. Yeah, and as I say, I think once we'll do a separate kind of deep dive with Lisa on that one. So that's the first thing. So let's move on. Again, you can take this document down yourself and take a look through it. So it talks about a number of concerns that came up, and they say some parents, and you see, we don't know how many parents. This is the issue. So they won't give us the data. They won't tell us how many parents were concerned about the lack, any reference to morality, family values, these kinds of things coming out in the curriculum. And we can see that. This is a huge issue with these curricula. And then the whole legitimacy. Some parents were questioning schools doing SPHE, RSE. In general, I'm not going to raise that as an issue. I think I don't have a problem for this to be covered. We cover this in other videos. we don't have a problem with SPHE and RSE in schools. If it's age appropriate and the content is appropriate, we don't have an issue with it. So some people did have a problem and would see it as a parental thing. That's fine. And they're entitled to that, their perspective, and they're entitled to opt their children out. That's important. The next thing, one of the big issues for parents, and again, we don't know how many parents. We know that it was a huge majority of the parents, because they were part of our group, would have had an issue with the whole issue of gender identities and stuff like that being covered. So there was a problem area where the parental voice was not really being listened to. The next one was the issue of pornography. And I think we saw that coming out of Mary's talk as well. And I guess this can be solved in a different way. And we would be advocates for solving it at the source, so that a minor cannot get the stuff on their phone, basically. We think that's the way to solve this. And then it kind of takes it off the table. You don't have to go into arguing about what sort of porn literacy you need to do in the classroom and all this kind of thing. If you can kill this at source, and now, unfortunately, there hasn't been support to do that. Ronan Mullen was attempting to bring this in last year. He didn't get support. And I think this needs to be revisited and dealt with properly, because that's the best way of dealing with it. Kind of just saying, oh, it's going to be there, it's going to be on all their phones, and then, oh, we have to do all sorts of classes about porn then as a result. That's
Just
not, I
get
don't
rid
think
of
that's
it.
an
Just
answer.
stop it, and you don't have to
Just
talk
stop it.
about it.
Yeah.
And there
Stop
was
it.
the Dr. Kate Dawson. I know there's papers that some people like her believe there's such a thing as ethical porn, and porn can be healthy, whereas in no way should a child ever think that there's ethical porn or porn that can be healthy. It's damaging. So it shouldn't be in the classroom at all. It shouldn't be on the phones at all.
Yeah.
And if they can't get rid of it on the phones, all a child should know is that pornography is dangerous. You shouldn't look at it. It's not real sex. It's damaging to people. That's it. You don't get into all the details, and that it can be ethical and healthy.
Yeah, exactly. So some parents objected to the specification, the content's not age appropriate. And yes, I think there's an issue there. And
We would
obviously that's
agree.
again something. And again, when we look at the standards for sexuality education that were, fed into the course from an international perspective, they're not age appropriate. And we went through those in detail. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. So you can see these are the concerns. These are all documented in that document. And I guess what we don't know is we don't know how many parents. So what percentage of the participants who gave the feedback had issues with these items? We just don't know that. And they're not telling us.
They won't tell us that, but I have a feeling now there'll be probably a formal Dail investigation that has to happen, and they will get that information.
Yeah, exactly. So link in the description, you can look at this. And here, Script covered it at the time. They talked about it. They talked about the vast majority of those parents, which we know because they were part of our group, were opposed to that notion of trans ideology in schools. And Gript are basically highlighting that issue that I mentioned to you, that they were not getting the FOI response from the department. So again, a link to that. So where can you get it? Here it is. We'll give you again a link. You can go download it yourself. This is the Junior Cycle SPHE Curriculum. And there's also, if you go down later on, you can see other information regarding the actual process of the curriculum. Some of the interim documents, etc., are in there. So this is the web page to go to, and you can get the document there. So.
And Eugene, I'll just point out that when you download, like before I started learning about all of these words and what they mean and doing a deep dive with yourself, the words on there can look very sort of safe and flowery and lovely, but that's where we're going to kind of make sense of what those words really mean, and from the root of where these documents are coming from.
Yeah, we'll try to help you decipher some of that, so to speak. So let's talk about the Welsh RSE influence. So we saw earlier on that Dr. Aoife Neary recommended taking a look at this and taking a look at maybe following the Welsh approach, or at least using it as input to our own SPHE course development here. And the key person involved in all of this is a Professor Emma Renold, who's based in Cardiff University. So most of the resources that we talk about with respect to the Wales RSE program would have been overseen by Emma Renold from Cardiff. Now, this is the document that was cited by Dr. Neary in her presentation. And again, you can see the authors, etc., in there. And this is the table of contents. And you can kind of see the stuff. It's obviously targeted towards the Welsh program. But I think we've got an awful lot of this came into our own program, to be honest, and we would see parallels in what came into the DCU SPHE program. Not surprisingly, because not only were we taking this from Emma Reno, but one of the lecturers from DCU, Dr. Leanne Call, was actually part of the Wales RSE development program. It's one of her projects. So if you go online to DCU, you'll see it here, preparing for the new relationships and sexuality education RSE curriculum in primary secondary schools in Wales. So that was one of her
Eugene, if I can
projects.
just pause there
Yeah.
just to kind of get our heads around it. So we had Dr. Aoife Neary went into the Dail in 2018, and she suggested that we model the sex ed program, the RSE in Wales, and then we have Leanne Call, another person teaching at this that was part of the DCU, who worked with EJ on the Wales program. So our program
Right.
would definitely be influenced by the Welsh RSE program, which I know another group in Wales, hopefully we will be connecting with very soon, has a big concern with the Welsh program. It's a disaster.
Yeah, no, there was a lot of concerns, and I will give you some references in the next few things. So this is an important linkage because Dr. Leanne Call was also one of the main lecturers for the DCU course that Mary was on. So she would have been giving some of the lectures as part of the course that Mary talked about.
And when we look at her bio, Eugene, you can pop up the bio when she joined the team, and there's a lot on there about the gender, the sexuality, very much similar to the bio we saw just a few slides ago. So it's that left, it's sexual, it's gender, and all of that is all throughout the bio.
Yeah, it's so this stuff is freely available online. So again, we'll give you the links. You can go and pull this down yourself. There's nothing here that's secret. And again, these are just some of the some events that Dr. Call would have been engaged with and speaking at in conjunction with Dr. Reno or Professor Reno in Wales. And again, she was immersed in it basically for about a year. I'm not sure what sort of arrangement they had, but just to say that this was her project for that year. It was pretty heavy, full on, I would say. So let's talk a little bit more about Professor Reno. So she has this I suppose resource called Agenda. Now, I would have kind of said on another video that I do believe Dr. Reno or Professor Reno does have an agenda, which is kind of an appropriate name. It's a downloadable resource, and again, we'll have a link to it. We covered it briefly in another video. And it's, transforming relationship sex education in Wales, England, and internationally. And Ireland is named as one of the international countries. So we are explicitly named as an adopter of the Agenda program from this professor in Wales. Now, just to give you an idea of EJ Reno and she has a lot of academic papers. So if you do searches online, on any of the Google Scholar or something like that, you'll find a lot of her papers. This is an example of one of them here. And again, I guess just to show you the kind of stuff that she's involved with, obviously it's about education, a lot of it, bringing in feminist theory, bringing in queer theory into education. Critical theory as well would be part of that. And she even in this particular article, she makes references to things like post-colonial movements, and even she talks about things like post-humanism in other papers. So she's very much into critical theory, Marxist critical theory, postmodernism, feminist theory, etc. So these are big things for her, and it comes out in the resources that she has. So it's not like anything surprising or hidden or anything like that. It's quite clear. And if you go through the Agenda resource, you can see it here, feminist activism, she's got these feminist Fridays, and I love something and feminism. I'm not sure what the thing is there.
Perhaps this is why they didn't have any men on that committee, Eugene. It's sounds like a real radical feminist, man-hating group.
I think the guys could have felt a bit out of it. So this is kind of important, right? So there's no balance here. This is the issue. The balance on that particular 13-person committee, there was no balance to this sort of stuff. So you can look at the resource yourself. I'm not going to talk about it anymore. You can download it and take a look at it and to see how
I
you
see
feel
white
about it.
privilege there, Eugene, on the little mobile phone on the
Yeah,
right.
I know,
White
I know.
privilege explained in
Well, there's
one
everything. It's
little comment.
misogyny. It's you're going to get all the stuff, right? It's
Oh,
so okay. People can take a look at it. It's
yeah.
there. Now, this is another resource that I think people are like. Mary alluded to this, and we showed one of the pictures was shown in the course of that video. You'd have seen it because it was one of the exercises done as part of the DCU course. They call it, this is this BISH training tool. They've got this thing, a Planet Porn resource. You can download it. I'll show you the online where you can purchase it if you want to purchase it.
I don't think, Eugene, I will ever be able to unsee these little sexual marshmallow beings that look like little children with
Yeah,
these big
no,
long genitalia. This is very a disturbing slide, to be
no,
honest.
I think that's the first reaction I had. I
Yeah,
think when you look at these
it's really
things,
disturbing. It's chilling.
it is chilling, and you know, they put in different terminology about different sexual things, and you've got these little figurines on either side of that look like little children. This is gross stuff. I mean, I found this really hard to look at.
Mm.
This BISH resource. It was used in the course in DCU. Now, whether they're recommending they're ever going to use that again, I would hope not, based on the communication we saw from the Department of Education today, that this stuff would never find its way into a classroom. But it was used on the course, absolutely. And Mary took photographs with her own phone, and this is where it came from. So here you go, guys. Link in the description. You can go and check it out yourself. Now, I think that rather because we're not familiar with the Welsh situation, so Safe Schools Alliance UK are familiar with the Welsh situation, and they've documented it very closely. So they've got a downloadable document. They talk about queer theory in Welsh schools. I know people are scratching their heads about what's queer theory. Read this. We'll give you a link to the Safe Schools Alliance webpage and to the document that they're talking about. This is the document here, reviewing the RSE in Wales. And just remember, it was E.J. Renold and Dr. Leanne Call and some other people in E.J. Renaud's team were responsible for this. So essentially, some of the same things were going to be brought back into the DCU course. That's the connection. It's a strong connection because the lecturer was there for a year working on this. I don't know if she was commuting or whatever she was doing, but here we go. So look at some of the points, the bullet points here. Posthumanism and queer theory. Like, I shudder at the thought of both of those things in a curriculum in any way. The redefinition of sex. The redefinition of sex. So again, you've got this strong feminist theory stuff coming through. Whole school approach. We said it before. You can't get away from it. It's in every subject. It's in every aspect of the school. Fundamental problems with these things. And then the sexualization
I'm trying to figure
of
out how they're
children.
going to redefine sex, Eugene, because sex has been around since the start of
I know,
human
I know,
beings. That's why we're
I
here
know. Well,
today.
I actually
How
have,
do you
yeah,
redefine that?
well, that's a term that the authors of this report
Hmm.
used, so I'm not
Yeah.
sure. So I would advise people take this download. Again, link in the description and have a read. It's actually a very good document. They go through it, and you can see it here. They talk about E.J. Renold. They talk about Esther McGeeney, who was the other kind of co-contributor. I've kind of the co-leads, as it were. They were probably the two main leads. I think Dr. Call was probably just working with them, and they go through it all. So you can read through this, and you can
The
read
whole
through the
school
whole school
approach, we're
approach.
seeing that. So that's a really important thing. If anyone wants to screen grab this or hit pause, read that whole school
Yeah,
approach. We're seeing this in Ireland. We've seen it already this week from parents who have tweeted books that their children are seeing. We are seeing the whole school approach, sex ed now in the English classes.
yeah. And you may remember when we put up on the screen the statement from Dr. Aoife Neary. She referred to the whole school approach.
Mhm.
So here it is.
Makes it very hard
Okay,
to
so
opt out as a parent.
yeah, you can't opt out because it's
Can't
everywhere.
opt out, but your kid wouldn't be going to school at all.
Yeah. Standards for sexuality education. So we've spent an awful lot of hours talking about these, Jana. So I'm conscious that some of the people watching this video, it's the first time you may have heard of them. So there's two standards of significance, one from the WHO and one from UNESCO. And again, these were kind of backdrops to the curriculum in general and to the activity in the DCU course as well. And they would be used as justification, basically, for taking certain approaches. Now, the strategy that's been chosen And I'm not sure who was behind the decision making on this because it's not covered in the meeting minutes associated with the curriculum development. But we have chosen the holistic sexuality approach, which is what's captured in the WHO document. And they've got a definition of what that means later on from the document. So we'll take a look at that later on. But it is the most sexualized form of education that you can use. And the fundamental tenet is that you're sexual from birth. Like that's the fundamental tenet that they have. And I think when you have that at the front of this, all your safeguarding goes out the window. Because it basically means, because of this, you're going to be exposing younger children to material and experiences at a younger age than anyone would ever consider acceptable in the normal course of events or from a safeguarding perspective. Because once you say they're sexual from birth like that, then it's not a good story. And we'll see some
just
examples.
asking our listeners, Eugene, whether you're on the left, the right, the center politically, or whether you're a Christian or atheist, whatever, would any parent believe that their child is born a sexual being? Children are not sexual. We should never accept that.
Yeah, I know. This is so the WHO, and some people have seen this before, call out, things like early childhood masturbation from ages 0 to 4. Also your gender identity from 0 to 4, and then your first sexual experience, as in the first sexual experience with another person, 9 to 12. Like, how in any, I'm just speechless. So it's in the document. It's black and white. You can take a read of it. It's a particularly egregious document. Like the UNESCO document isn't as bad. The UNESCO document starts at age 5, but the WHO one is 0. It starts from birth. So the other things that we have is this, they also incorporate the kind of affirmative view of gender identity, which you affirm somebody when a child, regardless of what age they are, expresses gender incongruence or whatever, you affirm them. There's no mention of all the complex psychological conditions that can result in a child expressing gender incongruence. Things like autism, or that they're actually same-sex attracted, or that they've been suffering mental trauma, that they were abused, perhaps. These are all the things that can lead to that, but no mention of that, of course. No mention of desistance, which we know occurs in 80% plus of cases without even any treatment, and the whole notion of detransitioning. So these two documents, and this is both of these documents, the WHO and the UNESCO document, do not include anything on any of these points. Yet they claim to be.
Eugene, I'll just jump in, and anyone who listened to our recent podcast, we won't go into detail here, but the legislation to ban conversion therapy would mandate and require medical experts to just simply affirm the child versus explore why they're suffering from maybe gender dysphoria and any confusion. They won't be able to figure out the root cause to try to work through it. It's just, you think you're a boy, Sally, that's great, affirm, and that's it. That they're trying to pass that through the legislation in Ireland at the moment.
Yeah, we'll come to that in another video. But so this is not good. And they say that, they talk about it being evidence-based, etc. Well, I'm sorry, because there's plenty of evidence regarding desistance and detransitioning, and they're not talking about it. So the next thing is the ethos of these documents. It's sex for pleasure. And so long as consent is in place and you're, applying appropriate protection, that's it. You're good to go. And there's no talk about love, commitment, marriage, family, etc.
So wait till they try to lower age of consent. They're going to try to teach masturbation age 0 to 4. We have an SPHE book I have in my possession right now that has several pages on masturbation, including, can you mutually masturbate? That's written by teacher Owen Cleary. And before you know it, the age of consent is going to go down a year, down a year, down a year. And then it's, as long as you get consent and it feels good, go for it. It doesn't matter if you're a child. We cannot let this happen.
Yeah, it's not good. So this kind of ethos, I guess, it's in line with queer theory. It's in line with the kind of neo-communist collectivist viewpoint of family and sexuality, which basically means no family. It's not healthy. And why are we teaching this to our children? We already have birth issues in this country in terms of our birth rates, etc. And what are we trying to do? Just make them worse. So not good. Now, I have to talk about it. And some people are going to go nuts when I talk about this, so I'm sure we'll get comments
This
regarding
slide
Alfred
is a
Kinsey.
trigger warning. This is more disturbing than the little sexual
Yeah,
marshmallow children. This one is, it took me
yeah.
a few weeks to get
Yeah,
over
so
this last time.
this is not suitable for little. And I mean, most of this
No,
presentation we didn't really say it isn't suitable for young ears. This slide definitely isn't.
no.
So this guy, who's the kind of grandfather of the sexual revolution, it's fair to say that, and he's revered, right? He's still revered
Mm-hmm.
for like opening up sexuality and all that kind of thing and liberating sexuality. He produced this book, which was his most successful book, The Sexual Behavior in the Human Male. Now, and he's basically talks about various aspects of sexuality in that. We're not going to talk about those. The one we're going to focus on is children. And this table appears in the book, this infamous table 34. Now, the data that he got to make this table basically came from child molesters, pedophiles, who actually, fed in the data to him, and it's horrendous. And the individual who was doing this was very meticulous. He used to use a stopwatch and a pen and paper to record the orgasms that the children were having while they were being abused. And it's just like, you can't make this up.
Look at that.
And
Look
if
at
you
that
do,
number 26. Anybody listening, just look on the
yeah,
bottom left,
yeah,
age 4. They gave a 4-year-old allegedly 26 orgasms in a day. That
in a
child was
24-hour
screeching in
period.
pain. That's child abuse. Anyone who thinks this is okay is part of the problem. They'd want to give their head a wobble. This is pedophilia.
Yeah, yeah. The notion that he's got the number of orgasms in the column there, these children were screeching out in pain, and it's horrendous. I mean, so many people still think this guy is great. So many people would be furious that we're showing this and say
Mm.
that's crazy, etc. But the reality is that the notion that children are sexual from birth is something that Alfred Kinsey would have been an advocate for,
And the
and he had a lot of
WHO, so
support.
back to where does this fit into the Irish education? You may be watching thinking, where does this fit in? WHO, UNESCO, sexual at birth. And that's the document that is at the root of that rotten tree that Ireland has referenced to build our education. So this is all part of it, sexual at
Yeah,
birth.
correct. And as I said, that document is regularly quoted by people like the HSE. So this is the controversy with Alfred Kinsey. It's a fundamental issue, and he was well supported. So he was heavily supported by the Rockefeller Foundation. They funded the Kinsey Institute basically for years. They were also great funders of the United Nations over the years as well. So there's connections there. But this is just crazy. So let's move on. So these are the two documents, the two offending documents. They've got these fundamental gaps. They claim to be evidence-based and all that kind of thing, but they leave out these huge, big, glaring gaps. They talk about gender identity as if it's just an absolute fact and that's it, and nothing about the fact that children may have these complex mental health issues, etc., and detransitioning and desistance. So, do you want this message? Is this the sort of incomplete information that you're happy? Because the SPHE curriculum right now also omits all of anything related to these items here. The Living Love Resources, the Catholic Living Love Resources, do talk about gender dysphoria. They do actually mention that and the complex mental health issues. So this is the difference between what you're getting in the government material, which is ideologically based, and the material, for example, that the Catholic schools have. I'm sure Muslim schools have their own stuff as well. So it's not the full story. You're only getting half the picture. This page here, this part 1, page 13 from the WHO document, it basically says the WHO document takes this approach of sexuality education starts from birth, that children are sexual from birth. And I say that's what we're endorsing in our SPHE material. So let's move on. Again, we have references to those documents. They're all downloadable. They're available on the web. You can review them yourself offline. And we have also videos that review them. And here are two documents, which are two very good documents, that are a critique of those documents. And so you might want to take a read through these, because these will outline things like the safeguarding risks associated with the approach that the WHO are advocating for. This is, again, there's a link in the description, RT, talking about the United Nations putting the pressure on us to introduce comprehensive sexuality education. Well, they didn't have to worry because we went one step further and we introduced holistic sexuality education, which is one step beyond. So the United Nations and UNESCO being the kind of education wing of the United Nations, are one of the biggest pushers in the world of this sort of educational practice of comprehensive sexuality education. They push it in everywhere. This has been going on for years, and and you can see them here putting put the strong arm on our own government, our own Department of Education to bring this in. You're not in line, guys. You got to bring it in. So this is the impact of people like UNESCO and the UN, which shouldn't be lost on us, that they're actually interfering in something which we really should have our own say on. Ireland should be determining its own future with regard to things like this, and not bowing to UNESCO or the WHO for that matter. And this is an issue because the SDG 30s, the 2030 SDGs, the 17 of them, I think, are doing the exact same thing. They're coming in and telling you how to live your life, how to think, how to run your economy, how to do X, Y, Z. That's a huge problem. We'll cover it in another video. Literally, this is going to have to head into the political sphere now, Jana. So some of this,
it's there. I've been getting phone calls off the hook this week from TDs and senators and political party leaders saying, give us more information. And we've sent, we had to do it through transfers. We've sent them loads more evidence, and it is becoming a political issue because that's how it's going to stop, because these people have infiltrated the government and academia and every aspect of society. And we're just going to keep saying no more, no more. So we will save it. I have to think there's optimism and light at the end of the tunnel based on this.
There's great teachers out there. They're fantastic teachers.
Absolutely. Great teachers, great parents,
let them do their
and
job.
Hopefully. Yeah. Absolutely. Teachers want to teach. Teachers don't want to bring this in the classroom. I pick up my son every day from school, a senior infant, and his teacher is lovely. And I can't even imagine her like being handed this thing. You have to teach this to this 6-year-old child. Like, the teachers don't want it. So hopefully we can get this out of school and primary, stop it from even going in school. So I think that's a good hour for tonight. So